Councilmember Doug Young has our prayer and pledge. Mr. Young?
Please join me in a moment of silence. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council, November 21st, 2013. And I notice a new attorney, not a new attorney, an old attorney, very old, different attorney sitting in the city attorney's chair. And I'm assuming that's because the city attorney's birthday is today.
And she's celebrating appropriately with her family in Florida.
Good. Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that note was made of the city attorney's birthday today, and we'll hold off to singing happy birthday to some other occasion, if that's all right.
Good idea.
We also have members of Youth Leadership Rutherford here. Let's see, where are they? If y'all would please stand and let us welcome you to our council meeting tonight. We're glad you're here. These are tomorrow's leaders, and we certainly appreciate your accepting the challenge to participate in that program. It's an excellent precursor of what's going to happen in the future, and we know you'll take it seriously, and we appreciate you doing that, and glad you're here. I was going to get Mr. Smotherman to explain why city staff and Mr. Smotherman were scruffy tonight, but Mr. Smotherman evidently's scruffiness has gone away. So
the itch has left.
So those of you who know what the scruffiness is about, what is it, Eddie?
It's in recognition of cancer awareness, and it's for the American Cancer Society, and it goes through the month of November. And for those who are participating, thank you very much. I know each and every one of us have been touched by someone or know someone who's been affected by it. And,
that's right.
So thank you to you all.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anything else before we begin our agenda? I know you want to get through this in a fashion that's brief and to the point, since the Raiders are playing Florida tonight. And so
they're going to put it on the screen.
Just a note to members, the meetings are much shorter when we don't talk. Okay. So your consent agenda tonight, you have that before you. If you have an opportunity to read through those items, are there any questions regarding any items on the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, hearing none, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
All right. Motion. Thank you. Motion and second by Mr. Young and Mr. Gilley. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gels-Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. At this time, you have the minutes of the November 7th special meeting and the November 7th regular meeting before you. Are there any alterations or changes to be made to those minutes as they are presented? If not, is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Young, Mr. Smotherman, thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gels-Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. This time you consider for passage on second reading an ordinance to amend the planned residential development PRD district located along Veterans Parkway.
Move for passage on second reading.
Second.
Thank you. A motion, Mr. Washington and Mr. Young. The second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilley?
Aye.
Ms. Gels-Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on October the 17th, 2013, we'll now conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 2.89 acres from single-family residential 15, RS 15 district, to single-family residential 12, RS 12 district. approximately 13.53 acres from single-family residential 15 RS15 district to residential multifamily 16 RM16 district, and approximately 0.36 acres from single-family residential 15 RS15 district to commercial fringe CF district located along New Salem Highway and St. Andrews Drive. New South Strategic Investments and Ms. Terry Weekland are the applicants. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 3rd, 2013 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Our first public hearing this evening is to consider zoning property located south of New Salem Highway and west of St. Andrews Drive from its current R15 district to 3 separate zoning districts. The request is divided into 3 parts. The first is to zone a strip of land that's approximately 2.89 acres from RS15, single-family residential district, to RS12, and that property is located along St. Andrews Drive and is identified on the blue color on the map before you. The rezoning of this property to RS12 would allow the property to be subdivided into approximately 7 lots with a minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet fronting along St. Andrews Drive. The goal is that these lots would be similar to the adjacent Bellhaven subdivision, which is also located along St. Andrews Drive. The Bellhaven subdivision located to the south is zoned RS12, and also the properties that are located to the west are zoned RS12. Just across St. Andrews Drive is property that's zoned PUD, Planned Unit District, and was zoned such several years ago with a mixed-use plan. However, that plan, development for that has not come to fruition. To the north, the remaining portions of property that are part of this request are currently zoned CF, and that's Commercial Fringe District. You can see the CF zone also extends north across New Salem Highway to those properties that are located within Murfreesboro city limits. The second part of this request is to zone the area shaded purple, which is 13.53 acres from its R15 district to multifamily residential district RM16. And if that property were zoned RM16, then there could be multifamily developments on this property permitted by right, and it is staff's estimation that there could be approximately 216 dwelling units maximum on this property without considering density bonuses. And then there is a very small strip of property, which you see in orange on the map, and it's identified as being zoned from RS15 to CF, Commercial Fringe District. And that property is 0.36, so it's much less than an acre. And the purpose of that zoning change request is to have the one entire parcel to be zoned entirely CF. So you can see just north of that parcel is an area that's white, and that property, and that is the remaining portion of the property, and it's currently zoned CF. So if this zoning request were approved, then that entire parcel would have the same zone instead of being split with mostly CF and a very small portion zoned RS15. These 2 parcels were zoned RS15 when they were annexed in 2005. At that time, they were part of a larger request, and there was no request made by the property owners to change the zoning for the property. So as our zoning ordinance states, properties that are annexed with no companion zoning request and zoned for residential or agricultural purposes in the county, they come into the city with a zoning classification of RS15, and sometimes we refer to that as an interim zoning. There have been no development plans since that time until today. The family who owns this property are now making a request to you to consider a different zoning for the portions of these 2 parcels. And there, as we explained earlier, the representative of the application is Ms. Cherie Akers, and she's in the audience this evening. She doesn't have a presentation. However, Ms. Akers would be glad to answer any questions that you may have directly from her as a representative of the developer. The Planning Commission did have all 7 members present the evening of this public hearing, and their recommendation to you is for you to approve this zoning request as submitted. If you have any questions for myself, I'll be glad to answer them, either before or after the public hearing.
Any questions for Ms. Green? All right, if there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing, and anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak? Anyone at all? Last chance. Then I'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to rezone an area along New Salem Highway and St. Andrews Drive to single-family residential 12, RS-12 district, residential multifamily 16, RM-16 district, and commercial fringe CF district.
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gilly. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Washington. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on October the 17th, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider annexing approximately 477.5 acres located along New Salem Highway and Veterans Parkway. Mr. Bill Rowland, on behalf of the Rucker Donnell Foundation, is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 3rd, 2013 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green, please continue.
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing is to consider a petition made to annex property by the property owners of approximately 477 acres. The properties are located along Salem Highway, and you can see them on the map that's on your iPads and on the screen before you. The area for which annexation is being requested is identified as the blue area with the white hatch. This map also provides us with some other information. You can see the green line with the chartreuse color. That's existing city limits, and from that you can tell that the area requesting annexation is contiguous with current city limits. That orange area with the hatch pattern on it is area which the City Council approved an ordinance to annex several years ago. However, that ordinance is not effective yet, and it's still in litigation. But we wanted to show you that area so you'd have a better understanding of what is located around this property. And then you can see the lighter yellow shade, which takes up the majority of the map, and it has the yellow outline, is the urban growth boundary. So you can see the areas which the city can effectively annex properties. The requested area is contiguous with current city limits. It is also located within city's urban growth boundary. It is adjacent to property that is, of course, in the city limits and the city's fire station, which at this time isn't open, but I think you're familiar with it. A portion of this property does have frontage on Veterans Parkway. This annexation does include approximately 8,012 linear feet of New Salem Highway right-of-way. It also includes approximately 2,148 linear feet of Veterans Parkway right-of-way. The application is being made by the property owners. No one is included in this annexation study that has not requested the annexation. Mr. Matt Taylor is representing the applicants, which is the Rucker Donnell Foundation. They own the properties, and they are requesting for the annexation of this property. The same evening that the Planning Commission held a public hearing to consider the annexation of these properties, they held a second public hearing regarding the zoning change request. At that public hearing, the Planning Commission knew that this property was something they recommend annexation for, so forwarded their recommendation to you to annex the properties. However, they asked the applicants to reconsider what they had initially requested for the zoning of their property. The zoning request for this property will not be considered this evening. However, will be at a city council meeting in December. I believe it's December 5th, but I'd like to double check. So tonight is only to consider the annexation of the 477.5 acres of property. The amended zoning request will not be considered tonight, but will be reconsidered at a future public hearing. The Planning Commission did unanimously recommend that you annex these properties. There's a plan of services that outlines what services will be available and a time frame for when they'll be available. And those have been included in your materials. Mr. Taylor does not have a presentation this evening. However, he's available to answer any questions you may have from him or the applicants. And of course, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have either before or after the public hearing.
All right. Any questions before I open the public hearing, council members? If there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this annexation request, please come to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak? Anyone here wishing to speak? Last chance. Then I'll close the public hearing. At this time, consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to annex an area located along New Salem Highway and Veterans Parkway. Mr. McFarland.
I just had a question on the status of 99. I think I had a lot of people who've asked us that, so.
It may be a question that can be better answered by the administration department, but I know that Mayor Bragg and our city administration have written a letter to TDOT asking them to move that project up further and get the ball rolling for that sooner. I don't know if anything's happened since the letter has been written.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a formal response from TDOT. Clearly that's one of the roads in the city that has some traffic challenges. We have encouraged TDOT to move that project up, and I think they're definitely paying attention to us. So, yeah, we do want to get a schedule, but right now we're waiting on TDOT to put that on the bid schedule.
But it's already gone through right-of-way
Yes, sir.
acquisition, correct?
Yeah. And that first section actually is going to go from Old Fort Parkway to Cason Lane. So the subject of this annexation doesn't necessarily touch on that part of Highway 99. A subsequent section would go from Cason Lane out. But the section that we wrote the state really focuses just on that first section at Old Fort Parkway to Cason Lane.
Mr. Smotherman.
Ms. Green, there's no concerns with rock quarry or standing water or any issues that have to be addressed before we continue with this. I'm assuming all those concerns have been worked out.
There were some questions that came up at the Planning Commission public hearing, and we did study those, and we studied those with Mr. Taylor and also with the city's engineer staff. I think maybe there were some misunderstandings about what exists and what caused problems. The annexation of this property will not change, it won't affect it in any way. It's not going to change problems that they may currently have or that they don't have. But I think Mr. Adelot was going to meet with, I'll invite him up here. I know he was going to meet with the person who made a complaint, who's in our minutes.
I'll just give you a brief report on that. The gentleman who owned the property to the south of this property is part of a closed depression. And what we have found is that he actually has been working with the county as well. The county has been very much aware of this. There's a combination of things, but one of the things is that there is a borrow pit on this property, and it actually has improved the drainage conditions because it added capacity for drainage. It's one of those things we want to monitor it. We certainly want to study it. I've encouraged the gentleman who spoke at the public hearing about the drainage to stay in touch. We're studying it. We're trying to learn about it. We're gathering information and encouraged him to stay in contact that when we have drainage or rain events to ring your bell so that we'll go out and take more photographs of it. But I did gather quite a bit of information on it. And actually, it looks like some of the problems are caused by the way he constructed his driveway below the depression elevation. So it's partly self-created, it looks like. But we will monitor it, and it's something that we will enlist him to help us because he's got a front door view of it.
Right. And I guess the water that was flowing to the borrow pit, is that what you call it?
Yes, sir, it was.
It was coming across his drive, and I guess it's understandable if he's got it down below what the flood line would be. Is that what you're implying?
That is exactly what we have found. And not only that, there's a drainage easement on his property for that water to go to that area.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Adelot. Any other questions?
Mayor, I was just going to say that I've been staying in contact with Representative Womack over that concern that he's had, and as of about a week ago, he said that he's very pleased with the line of communication that's been going on between he and the planning department. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
So he's not going to say this. So he's not going to say this.
Hearing none, I'll move for passage.
All right.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly? Thank you. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels-Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on October 17, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider a sign ordinance amendment dealing with flag signs. Building and codes and the planning staff are the applicants. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the November 3, 2013 issue of the local newspaper. How are you? Nice to have you, Ms. Kerr. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg, members of the council. Staff is proposing an amendment to the sign ordinance regarding temporary display of temporary flag signs. Staff has received several requests from churches and schools and other institutional group assemblies requesting to be able to display multiple flag signs throughout the year at times like Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Veterans Day. However, currently our sign ordinance only allows for 3 temporary signs on a lot at any given time. This proposed ordinance would allow for a display of unlimited temporary flag signs for not more than 15 days per year, and they shall not exceed 24 square feet in area and will only be able to be displayed on institutional group assembly uses with non-commercial messages. This exception will be in addition to the exception previously established for temporary events that have a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Staff and myself are available to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Kerr regarding this amendment to our sign ordinance regarding flag signs? If there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this amendment, please step to the microphone. Give us your name and address.
My name is Joel Powers. I'm at 5300 Old Salem Road, and I attend and work at Franklin Road Baptist Church, and we would be in support of this. We have a Patriotic Sunday every year. Many of you have attended that, and we'd like to put flags up for that, just for the theme of the day.
Thank you.
So we certainly appreciate you considering this.
And you do have an outstanding service. Been many times. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Mr. Powers, I appreciate you being here and speaking. If there is no one else, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we will consider for passage on first reading an ordinance amending Chapter 25 1/4 signs, Section 25 1/4-2 and 25 1/4-25, dealing with flag signs. Mr. Young, did you have a...
I move for passage on first reading.
Second. All right, Mr. Young. Mr. Washington, thank you very much. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. This time we'll consider recommendations of the Planning Commission to schedule public hearings to consider rezoning along Manson Pike to RM16, an annexation petition along Manchester Highway, zoning simultaneous with annexation along Manchester Highway, RS8, RS10, RS12, RS15, an annexation petition along Salem Highway east of Veterans Parkway, and zoning simultaneous with the annexation along Salem Highway east of Veterans Parkway to Commercial Highway. Mr. Adelite, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg and members of the council. During its meeting on November 6th of 2013, the Plan Commission considered the 5 items that you just read, and they are recommended that we schedule public hearings for them to move them forward as well.
All right. Mr. Ives.
We recommend December 19th.
December the 19th. Council members, just December the 19th, meet with your approval.
I'm guessing that will probably be our last meeting of the year. If history serves correct, is that right, Mr. Lyons?
I would expect that would be our last meeting of the year.
You ready?
All right, is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Is there a second? Ms. Harris? Second?
Yes, sir.
I missed you last time. I'll do you this time. Thank you.
That's okay, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Young and Ms. Harris, for December the 19th, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. At this time,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adelite. We'll consider recommendations of the Deputy Director of Building and Codes to schedule a public hearing for adoption of building codes. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, tonight, staff would like to recommend a public hearing be scheduled for adoption of new building codes.
All right,
State law requires that our residential code stays 7 years current of the most recently published residential code by the International Code Congress. Presently, we're under the 2006. In end of next year, they will be publishing the 2015 code, which means we'll be out of compliance with state law. And because the codes cross-reference each other so much, we're recommending that all the codes be updated. This would include the residential code, the building code, the fire code, mechanical, fuel, gas, plumbing, and property maintenance code. We'll be going to the 2012 for all those. 2009 International Energy Conservation Code, 2010 Standards for Accessible Design, and 2008 National Electric Code. You should have an amended letter in front of you listing all these codes. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Holtz?
I might add, Mayor, the Building and Codes Department and the Fire and Rescue Department have been conducting a series of stakeholder meetings. We know, this will be important to them in their industry, and so they've been reaching out and having a number of meetings to make them aware of the changes. So that's been a lot of conversation before we've led up to asking you all for a public hearing.
And if I could add one more thing, December 3rd at 5 o'clock in the council chambers, we have another stakeholders meeting scheduled.
All right.
From 5 to 6:30.
5 to 6:30 in the council chambers on December 3rd, another stakeholder meeting. So anyone wishing to learn more about these codes or the possible adoption of these later codes, more recent, should attend if they're interested.
Yes, sir.
Very good. December 3rd, 5 o'clock here in the council chamber. Questions from the council members? All right, when would you?
We would again recommend December 19th.
December the 19th. Council members, you have that date before you once again. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Second.
Mr. Smotherman. Mr. Young, Mr. Smotherman. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Parks and Recreation Director to consider bids for improvements to McKnight Park and Starplex ball fields and related facilities. Mr. Goodwin, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. We do have a recommendation for you tonight on the renovation of the four-field complex at McKnight Park and Starplex. Bids were issued on October the 27th, and you can see the improvements that we have listed here for improvements for the four-field complex and for Starplex. And then we opened bids on November the 18th. We received 4 bids. The apparent low bid, based on the base bid, was Trinity Builders here in Murfreesboro of $801,521. We did have 5 alternates that we bid, and we're recommending alternate number 2, which is a new roof on the Starplex building, and that amount would be $75,000. And that would bring the total to $876,521. We did allocate in the 2012 TML loan $974,000 for this project. If you take out the A&E fees, that leaves us a balance of $890,497, and that is gives us plenty of money for the improvements. We have had our architectural engineering firms, SEC and Lowson Associates, to look at that and verify with the builder that everything in the bid is correct. And we are recommending that we award the bid to Trinity Builders in the amount of $876,521. And we're asking that the mayor be authorized to execute the said contingent upon any legal review and approvals that would be needed for the contract, getting the performance bond, et cetera. And I'll be glad to answer any questions relative to the project. And also, Mr. Mark Lee and Mr. Matthew Kramer is here from our Architectural and Engineering Services, and they'll be glad to answer any questions as well.
Any questions regarding this proposal to accept these bids?
How old is the complex, or when was the complex built?
The Starplex is going on 18 years old, believe it or not. One of the reasons we're recommending a new roof for that one, we didn't know if we'd have enough money. Based on the bids, we do. We've had leaks, and we've gone out there and done a lot of things, and when it rains from a certain direction. So to be safe, in the base bid, we had it where we would try to seal up the flashing and do some other things, but at the end of the day, it may be the roof that's leaking. So we think that with the age of the roof and the things that we're doing, we think it's probably prudent to go ahead and replace the roof at this time as well.
Have we done any really major renovations out there?
No, Mr. McFarland, we sure haven't. The trees that are in the complex, we're saying that at Starplex we want to go back in and re-landscape that. Some of the ornamental trees are kind of at the end of their life. Some of the older trees are starting to push the sidewalks up. So we've got to relook at that. And so it's a pretty big renovation to that facility, but it should give us plenty of life for another 20 or 30 years at least.
Any other question?
Mayor, the only comment I would make, and I even had this conversation with Mr. Lyons today, that would like to, as we move forward, to find ways that we budget on a yearly basis of things that we need to work on so we don't have to do it all the
I
time.
agree with Mr. McFarland's assessment. We do need to do that, and that's going to be a part of our planning in the future to, instead of waiting till we have to do this massive, this scale of renovation, to start taking things, bringing those to you, and so forth.
Okay. With that, I move for approval.
All right, Mr. McFarland moves for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Goodman. This time, we will consider recommendations of the Assistant to the City Manager with regards to a state grant for proposed Schwann Cosmetics USA, and also consider for adoption a resolution in support of an application for fast-track economic development program funds for Schwann Cosmetics USA. Ms. Logan, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Council. The Chamber of Commerce, the State of Tennessee, and the City of Murfreesboro were proud to announce last week the location of Schwann Cosmetics USA to the City of Murfreesboro. We have a proposed very preliminary rendering of what this will look like, our new addition to Joe B. Jackson. Wow. This will be a facility that will be about 174,000 square feet on 25 acres, and it will have at the outset within 5 years 450 employees, with a mixture being corporate headquarter jobs as well as factory jobs. It's a combination. This is their headquarters. They're consolidating two facilities, their facility in New Jersey as well as their facility in Lewisburg, Tennessee, here in Murfreesboro. And one of the things that I'm bringing before you tonight is a state fast-track economic development grant. This is a new grant that the State of Tennessee legislature approved about a year and a half ago. This is the first one of its type that we've applied for here at the City of Murfreesboro, but it's for $900,000 that would aid in the construction of this new facility. The match from the City of Murfreesboro is zero. We would only serve as grant administrators and staff support. The money comes directly from the State of Tennessee Economic and Community Development, and this is part of their program for business relocation and expansion. The way that the grant works is that the headquarter building of the Schwann would submit their invoices to the city, we would review them, we would send a detailed list of payment to the state, and then they would reimburse us, and then we would pay Schwann. So that's how the grant money works. So we really act as a pass-through, but we also act for staff support throughout the process. We are asking for your approval of this tonight so that we can submit the application to the state of Tennessee and so that this item can go to the Tennessee Funding Board at their December 17th meeting. And with that, I will be glad to answer any questions that you have on this grant application that's before you tonight.
All right, you have this recommendation. Are there any questions of Ms. Logan? We're certainly proud to welcome a new neighbor.
Absolutely, Mayor, always.
This recommendation, I think, will help facilitate that. So is there a motion to accept this recommendation?
So moved.
Mr. Young?
Second.
Mr. McFarland? Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Then we have this resolution. Do we need to pass that also?
Yeah, that's the most important part.
Move for adoption of the resolution, Mayor.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gilly. Mr. Washington?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, so this is the resolution that is before you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you
And
very
Ms.
much.
Logan is working as our single point of contact also. Is that correct, Mr. Lyons?
Yes, sir. For our large economic development projects, we, especially for folks who are coming from out of town, in order to make it easy on them, we appoint a single point of contact. Ms. Logan will serve that role for us. So as their team has questions, they don't need to try to figure out who in the organization they need to speak with. They'll just call Ms. Logan, and then we'll get them in touch.
So we don't give them the tour of the city hall and let them like a treasure hunt where they...
We have already met with them, and we had a room full of staff so that they could see everybody all at one time. Certainly want to compliment Mr. Latour. This project actually started when Ms. Sears was still here, and Mr. Hercules has been very diligent with it. So this has been a long year in the making and a lot of hard work by our chamber staff, and this happened in large measure with their hard work, so I want to compliment them.
And more to come.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, beer permits. Ms. Wright.
Mayor, we have one tonight at 417 North Thompson Lane. We have a new restaurant. So this is an ownership and name change. And they have met all of our requirements, and we're ready to issue the permit if approved.
You want to pronounce that name?
Mr. Chin Authentic Chinese.
All right, good. Thank you. Any questions from the council, or is there a motion to accept this beer permit?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Washington.
Holding out.
Vice Mayor, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly. Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, you have the statements to be considered for payment. Are there any questions regarding any of these bills to be paid, or shall we pay the bills?
Move to pay the bills.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. McFarland, seconds. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. I have no board and commission appointments. Do you, Mr. Lyons?
Yes, sir.
Any other business from the staff or from the council? Mr. Smotherman.
Real briefly, because I know some people are in a rush to get out here, but the ribbon cutting this morning at Goodwill was an absolute fantastic event. Great to see Goodwill with their involvement in the community and their new drop-off location out on Church Street with the Career Solutions Department, which is phenomenal. Excellent facility, and I think it'll be a real asset to getting people trained and to work. And so it was a good event, and thank you to Goodwill. And there's a little football game in Murfreesboro tomorrow night, something to do with the TSSAA playoffs, Oakland and Blackman. I don't have a favorite, but it's quarterfinals, and I encourage everybody to go out and watch a great football game.
All right, and then let's all say Happy Thanksgiving together.
On three. 1, 2, 3.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Now, anybody?
Mayor,
That's
just one
right.
thing. I didn't bring this up during the consent agenda because I thought it was the same letter as in your packet. Mr. Callow of Community Development provided a new letter for a budget amendment. The carry forward number for our emergency shelter grant was incorrect. And checking it to my packet, Ms. Michoto was very efficient and had already put the new letter in, and that's why I thought it was the same letter, and I did not bring it to your attention.
All right.
It's about a $4,900 difference from your original letter.
So E as revised. All right. Council members, any questions regarding that revision?
I move we accept the revision.
All right, thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Harris, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. We welcome our guests. Please come anytime. We certainly appreciate all of you being here. And with that, and no other business, you're adjourned.